Königsberg, the Soviet attack on East Prussia, 1945, from Revolution Games. This is a game that I did a sort of unbagging on way back, months and months ago. In fact, one of the first videos I did on the channel was related to this game in this series. But, you know, I finished up Great Campaigns in the American Civil War. I didn't know how those were going to do over, and because I record a lot of this stuff in advance and schedule it on YouTube, I didn't want to just keep flooding the channel with GCACW in case no one was enjoying it or I really messed up the gameplay. So I decided to switch to something a little familiar and a little simpler, just to kind of provide a little interlude between content. I do want to go back to GCACW, and I'm going to be curious to read your comments and so forth on the channel on those videos. The first one seems to be doing okay at this point. But I have also been wanting to get back into this system, of which there are 3 games from Revolution Games. And you know that the first one I played, one of the original videos and playthroughs I did on this channel was Across the Narva from the same designer and developer team and Revolution Games. And I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic game, and I've been deeply desperate to get back and play some of the other titles. So here we are. 1945, Königsberg, the Soviet attack on East Prussia. Now, I am not going to go through the rules per se, as I have already done that in Across the Narva. This uses the exact same system, and actually in some ways is a little simpler than Across the Narva, a little more straightforward. But as you can see here, we have got the Soviets and the Germans, the classic World War II East Front struggle, as the Soviets push north towards Königsberg and East Prussia. We have got a nice looking map. It is mostly clear spaces and white, which is nice. I wish the German counters were a little more high contrast with that. But it's a nice enough looking game. And again, this is a chit pull system, if you watched Across the Narva, with a huge number of chits, actually. And each turn, each side is going to get a certain number of chit activations that are going to activate, you know, some particular unit formations on the map. You can see here the Germans, they've got this 20th Corps, or 20th Division, I guess, in this system. They're orange. Got some independent units that don't have a color bar. If they are within range of any HQ unit, which are these here for the Germans and these here for the Russians, they can activate as well, a certain number of them per formation activation. Attack, defense, movement. It's a pretty simple system, pretty standard, very easy to play if you've played any Hex Encounter war game before. So let's talk about the objectives for each side, how you win, all that stuff. You can see that some of these spaces, specifically the cities and towns with red text on the map in East Prussia, have victory point markers on them. And I believe there are 14 of these in the game. The Germans have to capture 7 or more in order to win. The historical result of this particular front and conflict over the course of sort of early January to February 1st, 1945 was exactly 7. So the game's challenging you to meet or exceed that. The German army here set up in these highly defensible fortified positions all across what is northern Poland towards Königsberg. And we've got 2 types of defensive terrain for the Germans. We've got the defensive lines, which are these black kind of trench-looking things, and then we've got the Festung lines, which are these red arrows, which are even worse. Russians don't want to be attacking across there. And this also kind of controls the flow of the map and where the Russians can try and break through. You can see there's some gaps, kind of, if the Russians kind of go this way, they push that. Of course, they have to draw the right shits to be able to do that. But the Germans essentially trying to play defense as much as possible. There may be some opportunities for counterattacks. The Germans do have some armored brigades, an armored division here. It looks like armored vehicles, not necessarily tanks, but they do have tanks as well. And there might be some opportunities for counterattacks against the Soviets. Soviets are going to want to penetrate deep and kind of, you know, cordon off the German army and make their way, because a lot of the victory points lie sort of in the middle of the map here. Königsberg itself is up here, and actually they can, the Russians can cause some German supply havoc if they're able to cut the Autobahn between Königsberg and Elbing. up here. So that might be a long-term goal for the Russians. Now, on the Soviet side, they are broken up into two fronts. We've got the third Belarusian front, and we've got the second Belarusian front, excuse me. Each Belarusian front has its own set of units, and you can see they're slightly different colors. They've got their own set of activations, so each front is going to have potentially different numbers of activations per turn, which is going to kind of be an interesting ebb and flow for the campaign. They've also got their own air forces, and neither the twain shall meet. They can stack together if for some reason they somehow meet in the middle here, but they're not allowed to attack together. They're not allowed to share air power, and they have their own shits for activating. So it's kind of almost like you're playing two separate games against a single opponent. And the rules do say you could play this 3 players if you wanted, where 2 players on a team take a Belarusian front, and then 1 player plays the Germans, which might be really cool in like a con environment, or if you have a friend and you want to play a war game, but you have 3 of you. So that's pretty cool. Not a lot of time do you see 3-player war games, especially of the hex encounter variety. So that's the basic intro I'm going to give you. We're just going to start going and start pulling chits. The first turn, each Russian front has 3. The Germans have 3 as well. So everyone's going to get 3 activations on this turn. The game is going to last 10 turns, or up to 10 turns, on turn 6, you can see a cube up there. So these 2 formations, the German 55th and the 6th, their units are not allowed to, I believe, attack, or they're not allowed to move beyond the command range of the HQ. So down here in this sort of central bulge area, they can't leave sort of their HQ command radius. Now, if these HQs get attacked, I believe that frees up, or by turn 6, then these units are free to move. So the Russians, while they don't have to contend with their left flank and right flank over here, they will have to be careful that they don't leave it completely undefended, so that these guys can sneak out and cut supply at some point. So again, very heavily reliant on the chits. Amazingly replayable system, extremely easy to learn. It's only 10 pages of rules, and we're going to be off and running right now. I lied. There is one thing we have to do, and that is we need to roll for each side a number of artillery barrages to start the game. Each side, the Germans and then each Belarusian front is going to roll 2d6, and that's going to determine how many artillery barrages they get to open the game. With the Germans going first, they can target any unit within 2 hexes of an enemy unit. So I guess at least in this section of the map, this line of Germans and this line of Soviets are going to get pounded by artillery, and then over here we've got a similar situation. And so I'm going to roll those up and do those. We're resolving artillery here on this 2-to-1 column, and the combat system in this game very simple, standard odds based, 1d6. You either get attacker results, defender results, and it's either losses or retreats, and so very seamless and easy to play. So let us now get going. And right off the bat, the Germans roll boxcars, so they're going to get 12 artillery attacks to open this game, which is kind of insane. So let's go ahead and do that. Result of the German barrage. Not a whole lot. A lot of retreats, very few losses. The only loss that the Germans managed to do was against this armored core, which actually was an 8 strength unit, so that loss is pretty important. But they used 11 of their 12 barrages. They used all 12 of their barrages and didn't get really anything other than retreats. So the only effect that's going to have is make it so that the Russian barrages are not able to target very much. So I'm going to roll those up, and I actually think on this front over here, the Germans pushed the Soviets too far away for the Soviets to be able to counter barrage, so don't have to do that. And I think over here, the only unit that could possibly get barraged is this one, because it's 2 hexes. So let's see how many the second Belarusian front gets. Let's roll that. That is a die off the table. They get 7. So they're probably not going to be able to use all of them. So we'll start there. And that is that. This unit retreated 2 hexes. So we're ready to start the game. And actually, as I read the rules right now, all barrage attacks in this opening phase actually have a -1 modifier on the die. So there may be a couple in here where a retreat wasn't necessary. I'm not going to go back and fiddle with it. But what that does mean is that it's impossible to do step losses in the first opening artillery barrage. So that guy would have been, he would have gone here, and he would maintain his full strength. Anyways, if that's fixed, now we can get started. All right, first turn's already over. First couple of days in the January portion of this campaign. The second Belarusian front didn't have much activity happening here. A lot of maneuvers, zones of controls. I forgot how expensive this system makes zones of controls moving into, so it makes it very hard to approach the enemy as you get closer from further away. So you have to get close, then kind of move a little bit, which makes some, kind of a little bit of sense. So there were no attacks or combats over here. There was an artillery barrage that didn't do anything. On this side of the map, with the 3rd Belarusian front, we did have some combats. We actually eliminated this German division here. And the Russian 39th Corps, I believe, was able to push this flank a little bit. We had an armor attack that was able to get some ground. Armor very powerful in this system on advancing after combat. They can advance 2 hexes regardless of EZOCs. So they can really outflank more stationary forces. We had the 29th Corps move in. They push back this small armored unit over this river. We're trying to get to sort of this minor river right here. It's pretty punitive to move and attack across minor, or any river really. So we're trying to get the 29th Corps going this way, and we're trying to get on this side of the river, and we're trying to get the 5th Corps going this way on this side of the river. They did do a loss in here despite these defensive lines, but they weren't able to dislodge the unit. In all, the Russians rolled pretty well in their combat. They also used one of their air units in this attack here to push that armor back. But they've got 4 air units. Now, the one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the game, 2 of these air units, you can see they have the dice symbol on them. When these get used, they only come back when you roll a 6, and you check once per turn at the beginning of the turn to see if the 3rd Belarusian Air Forces come back. So we want to save those for, well, there's two schools of thought. Well, use them early, and on average, you should get them back once during the game, or you want to save them for a really key moment, and then maybe you'll get lucky and get them back. But the air power over here not as strong as you go through the game as it would be with the other front, who's got 3 aircraft that they can use all the time. The Germans, for their part, they only have 1 aircraft, 1 Luftwaffe unit. We've got to be very smart about how we use that. Right now, the Germans have taken their defensive positions along this sort of first line, and we'll see how long they can hold it. Making my way through turn 3, we just drew this special event, Withdraw, this Guard Corps, this German Guard Corps, which is pretty devastating for them. So they lose this HQ, they lose, this only happens once in the game, but they lose this HQ, who's kind of here in the middle, but he has got easily some of the Germans' best mechanized units. So he comes out. We have got a guard unit here, so we lose this battalion, and we lose... there's one under here. We lose this Fusilier regiment. So that weakens this line over here in the west. And there is one more that we have to lose, and it's a very good unit if I recall correctly. I believe it might be, no, not under there. It's under here. There it is. This 868 division gets removed from the game. Now, they're not removed from the game permanently. There is another special chit that can come in that can bring them back as reinforcements. They're just being temporarily withdrawn, but that does hurt the defensive strength in some of these areas. So just wanted to call that out for you here. I'm almost done with turn 3. When I am, I'll come back and show you the state of things and what the Russians have been up to and what the Germans have been up to, and maybe some of the mistakes I think I have made as both sides. All right, as promised, turn 3 complete. All factions, all sides got full activations that turn, full activation allotment. You can see down here, up there are the Germans, and a lot of activity taking place. The Germans in a bit of a compromised position now. The Soviet machine took a little while to get started on turns 1 and 2. It seemed like they weren't making very much progress, but they finally managed to drive the tip of the spear and cause some breakthroughs on either side. And I'm going to go ahead and show you both of those. But the one thing I did want to mention is that the number of chits in the cup and just that are available, you can see the Germans here. This is the dead pile, by the way. The Soviets causing lots of damage to German armor, which is expensive to bring back with replacements. Soviets themselves only losing this armored brigade so far, so they're trading quite nicely. Because of the number of German chits proportionally to the rest of what's in the cup, it seems like the Germans have a higher likelihood of getting their chits chosen at the beginning of a turn and therefore have to act first, which is a nice little subtle sort of thing that's kind of built into the game that you don't really notice till you start playing it, but definitely keeps them in sort of an unsure state whether or not they can afford to counterattack, knowing that those units will then not be able to activate probably for a long time, versus pulling back and trying to find a defensive position that they can hold. So it's an interesting feel. It's a challenge that kind of emerges as you play. Let's get a little closer and look at both the second Belarusian front and the third Belarusian front and sort of see what's happening there. All right, second Belarusian front, taking you down the line. So the Soviet 49th here has got a couple of really, really big armored units in there. Their objective right now that I've decided is hold this flank in case these units end up getting released at some point. They can't cut supply. But essentially what their job is they're trying to push the German 20th back out of these fortified position in these woods, because there is a road that runs up here to the center of the board. And if the Russians can get in here, they can cause all kinds of havoc all over the place. They can thrust from this flank, they can go this way, lots of undefended VPs back here. So they've decided that they're going to see what they can do there. Now, it's been slow going, but they do have a lot of force, and the Germans have taken some losses. There's an armor unit under here that is also defending. This is the key hex here. Once these two here, once the Germans lose these, they're gonna have to fall back pretty hard. They've also got to worry because over here on this part of the front, you've got the Russian 48th and the 3rd Corps who are threatening to envelop and encircle this unit, who's kind of stuck right now because of zones of control. And like we saw, the guard unit that was helping the German 23rd defend this sort of defensive line here is gone. The Germans got kind of lucky because the 3rd didn't get to act, they didn't have their chit drawn, and the 48th made an attack, but it was a disaster and they had to retreat. So not sure how much longer, given everything else that's going on over here, these Germans are going to be able to hold this versus having to fall back. But so far, they've held the Soviets at bay on the sort of eastern end of this Belarusian army. However, over here, you can see that a major breakthrough was had right up this line here, and that's thanks primarily to for two reasons. Let me get some tweezers so my finger is not in your way. It's primarily because of the 16th Armored Corps and the 86th Armored Corps, who have been just all over the map, attacking every which way. They've got 16 attack points between them, so it's really hard for the Germans to stand against them, especially with only one air unit. And don't forget that every single time a headquarters within range of these two units activates, they can be activated. So they're just wielding these guys like a hammer, and Soviet armor is just running rampant over the Germans. That caused a small breakthrough here, and that allowed the reinforcements from this turn, the 5th Guard, who again also have huge armored corps here of the same quality and strength, plus a motorized corps here as well. To exploit this gap, they got to go kind of near the end of the turn. In fact, I think they were the last move on this front. They exploited this gap, and now they are in position to essentially mop up an undefended HQ, which they can overrun without having to fight. They put the hurt on this infantry division here, and other than that, it is going to be just a field day for them to get up here, grab some victory points all the way basically up here. There's no one standing in their way. So, they might try and wipe these guys out, and then that should be pretty easy, and then they can cut these guys off of supply, and then basically it's game on for the Soviets to get as far as they can driving this way, which is going to force these guys to have to retreat ultimately. They just haven't had their chit drawn. The Germans they're sitting there, command confusion, not able to do much. As we take a look over here on the 3rd Belarusian front, we've still got the two air units that have this sort of variable, low likelihood of return. I'm trying to save them for a really important moment. You can see we had the 11th Guard, the 39th, the 28th, and the 5th all commit to various activities. The Germans actually did counterpunch down here, and that's where this eliminated brigade came from. He was kind of caught out in no man's land on the left side here. The German 41st Panzer got an activation. They brought in a bunch of these armored units, and they were able to crack down and knock that unit out of here. And so now they've got a pretty robust defensive line here around the Soviet 28th and 2nd Guards that's going to be very difficult without some air power to get some movement on. But that's okay, because the Soviets have made a huge advance over here on the eastern flank. They shoved all of the units here out of the way, thanks in large part to the 39th having just a ton of units under its command, plus a couple of independent armored units as well up here, some big armored corps there. And they were able to rush forward, exploit that gap, and really separate these sort of garrison forces here in the east away from the rest of the army. So these guys are just going to kind of drive now, I believe, towards Insterberg, which is a victory point here. And if they can do that, that's going to compromise this German position as well. The Germans thought with this big armored division as part of the HG Corps, which I think is Hermann Goering, which seems to be in every World War II game. They seem to be everywhere in Europe during this time. They thought that they could maybe make a defense around Gumbinnen. But that is looking like it is not going to be possible with the Soviet 39th able to outflank them. So, the Germans all over the map are in a real world of hurt. They are holding okay against some of these Soviet forces here, but it's only a matter of time. If they get swept up in sort of a flanking pincer right here, it's going to be easy pickings. And in general, like I said, I think I've made a few mistakes. So first of all, with the Germans, I feel like I have defended a little too hard along some of these lines of defense, where I didn't necessarily have the strength to do it, and the Soviets could absolutely stomp me. So I think in future plays, I might be a little more willing to give ground, and I think moving forward, the Germans are definitely going to do that because they are in a bad way with some of these breakthroughs. On the Soviet side, I probably haven't played positionally as well as I could, although I am making good use of these independent armored units to just absolutely lay the smackdown on the Germans. But you can see there's some traffic jams happening in here where, you've got the Soviet 5th, where they've got half of their corps essentially not able to get into a position. Zones of control are pretty sticky in this system, so once you get locked in next to someone, it's really hard to leave those spots. You can't really shuffle your front too much. The traffic jam situation here is probably not the most optimal move. Same here again with the Soviet 28th. And obviously this defensive line down the center of the map kind of funnels and limits the ability of the left flank of the 3rd Belarusians to make some progress. Although now it's opened up a little bit, so I might consider swinging around here. Definitely don't want to be attacking through any of these lines, however. Over here, I think I've done a lot better with the Russians and the Soviets. Certainly this breakthrough here is devastating for the forces that were trying to hold this river line. Here, this has not necessarily been a bad play. I just haven't been able to get the activations I need to really dominate this part of the map. And obviously with the forests here, that's a column shift left for the defender, so it's a little harder to take. But, I think if I'm the Russians right now, if I'm the Russian player, I'm feeling like I've done most of what I needed to do. And as the German player, I may have overcommitted. So we're going to change tack as we move forward. And we're a third of the way through the game, a little under a third of the way through the game, and we're heading into turn 4. The actions that each side are going to get are going to vary wildly now. In turn 4, the Germans are going to have 5. That's the same as last time, but then the second is only going to have 5. And then as we go along, you're going to see the number of actions start to drop off until the end when the second Belarusians get to thrust forward a little more as well. So that is where we are, and let's go. And as I'm doing the reinforcements for turn 4, you can see that the Soviet 43rd from off in the east has arrived at this particular area here. That's going to put an immense amount of pressure on this German flank. They are going to have to fall back immediately. Otherwise, this corps here risks absolutely pocketing a huge portion of this army pretty quickly, assuming they get their chit drawn. We are now just about 2/3 of the way through the game, end of turn 6 here in Königsberg. The Russians have had a couple of solid turns, especially over here in the west, and a couple of things that didn't go their way. The Germans have sort of gotten their act together a little bit, but they're definitely at a huge disadvantage in terms of the number of actions they're taking every turn. They only got 3 last turn, and they are just completely... It's really compounding their disorganization as they try and get into better positions. They just can't move everyone every turn, and so they're leaving a lot of guys strung out and really exposed to be eliminated. We can start up here, over here on the 3rd Belarusian front this time. We did have a Russian attack coming out of the east here that was repulsed, and this is the German 43rd Corps, and they... have not been able to activate again. They tried to attack across this river and take this town here, which is Tilsit. Didn't work out for them, so it's been kind of quiet. Elsewhere, the 39th Corps has gotten a bunch of activations. They have moved up and around Gumbinnen. The Germans are furiously fighting to keep the supply lines open through here, and they have been successful at doing that so far. They can trace out to Engerap, and they've got the roads open. The road open going this way. So it's kind of a tight thing. The 41st Panzer Division here has been trying to pull back for the last couple of turns. They've successfully managed to kind of disrupt the left flank of the 3rd Belarusian front here. They came down, they counterattacked Then they pulled back. They abandoned this defensive line here because it was just kind of untenable. What had ended up happening was the Soviet Second Guard Corps decided to take a different tack. They were tired of banging their heads against this wall, which the Germans had locked down pretty hard. So they backed out. They decided to come around this way and try and secure the roads up through here, which is pretty undefended. And in doing so, they actually eliminated this HQ that controls these units. So these units are basically done for. They can't really do anything for the rest of the game. And then, you know, they were threatening. They came down this road and they were kind of threatening to put some pressure on this supply source because their restrictions about where they could go had kind of eased up. But as soon as that happened, the Second Guard came through. And it was just an unlucky circumstance for the Germans. This corps had actually already activated, and then they drew a chit that allowed any corps on this side of the map to activate. So they got a double move, and that enabled this 444 unit to come through here and eliminate the headquarters. So nothing to worry about here now. Now the Germans are going to have to, or the Soviets, excuse me, are going to have to push up through here. The 41st Panzer is trying to fortify some of these really bad, really good for them, defensive lines. You know, there's not a lot of victory points in here, but obviously, just like chess, control of the center of the map gives you a lot of options. So they're kind of in a fighting retreat. They're trying to hold until they can get their units out. And they've been doing a good job. They haven't actually suffered really any losses. They've held the Russians at bay for almost more than half the game here, and now they're on their way back. The closest victory point on this side of the map here is at Insterburg, which is still kind of a stretch for the Soviets at this point. They're trying to deal with this down here. They can't leave their supply lines open too long. And unfortunately, some of these corps, like the 5th Corps down here, has not had a chance to activate in almost 2 turns, so they're just sitting around, but they've got lots of armor they can swing up here, and really the Soviets need that to happen. They can come up here through this gap. They can overrun this HQ, which if it's not careful, is just going to get eliminated, and it hasn't been able to move either. The purple German units have not had an activation. And just take Insterburg there. You know, a little bit of drama here, a little bit of uncertainty, but unfortunately they only got 3 activations last turn, and that was, you know, they got stuff that was kind of in a position to not really push forward. So that's kind of, you know, it's cool when that happens because it kind of represents the confusion, the command organization of what's going on over here. But I think they're about to have a big turn. I think next turn, this is going to get 4 activations on this side of the map. As we scooch over this direction, you can see that the Soviets got a ton of reinforcements, these small 114 units, which I chose not to push forward. I chose to just have them kind of garrison this marshland here in case the German 55th decided that it was going to try and do something. At this point, it's pretty much locked down, not going to happen. You can see that the German 20th actually pulled back away from... what is this? Ostroleka or Scharfenwiese here, because ultimately the breakthroughs that the Soviets have made on this side of the map are nothing short of disastrous for the Germans, and they are in a very bad way here. The Soviet, what is this? This is the Soviet 5th Guard tanks have just annihilated everyone in their path. There is no German unit left over here. Most of the Germans left have sort of pulled back and are trying to fortify this sort of defensible position here. There's a town here, not a victory point town, so the Soviets don't want to spend too much time messing around with that. They really need to get going. But you can see that the first points of the game did come here from Schroedersburg or Plock. This was this 36th Corps unit just raced ahead. The Soviet 70th was able to eliminate the resistance around these major river and these bridges. They were able to push ahead, and the 5th Guard tanks are on their way all the way up here, pushing towards Thorn and Graudenz up here, which are victory points, and Kulm up here, which is victory points, and just very thinly held. The Germans have not had a lot of reinforcements or replacements for that matter. So if the chits come out right, the Soviets are essentially just going to be able to wind up into northern Prussia unopposed, and there's not a lot anyone can do about it. And that's going to be some more victory points. That being said, we are on turn 6, and the Soviets have only managed to score 1 VP. And they do need to get to 7 in order to win. So I would say that even despite the hammering the Germans are taking here, they are doing enough to hold the Soviets back, and the Soviets probably need to stop dithering and be a little bit more cutthroat. It's not helping when things like this happen here, which is the 65th Corps made an attack, an overwhelming attack on this town here, Zieknau. and this puny Volkssturm unit managed to hold out and resist the attack. So they're holding on to this for one more turn, although this Volkssturm unit now gets returned and the German player will have to replace it at the beginning of this upcoming turn. But as you can see, the second Belarusian front is making great progress for the Soviets there, and I think in the next couple of turns we'll start to see the victory points pile up. Here's the German dead pile. Lots of German armor. An entire division here that with their HQ gone. This HQ, like I said, gone. Just a ton of units destroyed, and it's looking mighty thin on the ground for the Germans, the Wehrmacht. Germans getting the benefit of a turn of fortune. We got the random event shit. The random event we rolled was bad weather. That took all the aircraft on the map and moved them over here to the refit box. Anything that was in the refit box went back, or excuse me, moved them to the, refit box. Anything in the refit box got moved to the grounded box, which does mean that the two air units that only come back on a 6, which had not been used, and maybe this is the reason why you should probably use them, is they are now there, and they only come back on a 6. So that is really cut in half the 3rd Belarusians' air power, which is slightly problematic given that they still have been unable to make progress here. And the units that they did get to activate this turn were not the most useful ones. The 43rd kind of stuck. Where are they? Where's the 43rd? 43rd, yeah, they're kind of stuck. The 28th right here, they're kind of stuck. And the 31st finally cleared the town here of Gumbinnen, so they're going to be able to move, but they can't move again this turn. And then again, the Volkssturm here putting up a huge defense against this armored core. Armored core could not break through into Ripon, and so the offensive of the 5th Guard tanks has stalled out just a little bit. And finally, the German 23rd made just a horrible odds attack. They were basically almost surrounded here. They made a horrible odds attack with some support from this reduced strength infantry division, and they managed to break out. They forced a retreat on this motorized half-tracks corps, and they managed to break out and advance over here to the road to keep their supply lines open. They are separated from the rest of their unit up here, but it will save them come the supply phase because they were able to get on this road, and this road right now is being held by the German 20th to get back up to supply sources. So the Germans putting up a spirited fight here on this turn with a full round of activations for everyone. We're about to do, let's reach into the cup here and pull. What do we get? What do we get? We get the Russian 3rd Corps. So that's going to be these guys here. So we'll activate them and we'll continue on. Well, the Germans just had the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper show up off the coast of Braunsberg here in northern Prussia. Not sure if that's an indication that the Russians should be threatening that part of the map, but the Hipper can fire 2 hexes away using its combat strength when it's activated by an HQ. So that's pretty cool. Doubt the Russians will make it that far, but I might be playing the Russians poorly. We'll see. Some action here in the north on a couple of back-to-back chit draws. We got a random event, rolled Snake Eyes on that. That allowed the 15th SS division here to roll in into Kulm and protect that, which had just a small garrison unit on it. As you can see, the 5th Guard tanks have raced up here. They're trying to snag some of these points. Fortunately for the Germans, they then pulled the Guard Returns chit, which allowed the entire German Guard corps that had been removed earlier in the game to come back in up here. They used the railroads to get in here, and they've actually now cut the 5th Guard tanks off from their advance and actually cut this guy out of supply, it looks like. So just a poor turn of events for the Soviets as they were getting ready to score some more points, and the Germans, from nowhere, seemingly scratched together enough defensive manpower to make life miserable for them. It's funny how things happen. As soon as I hit stop recording on the last segment, the guards drew their command shit, as you can see up here, and they got to move, and they moved down to sort of block the advance of the 5th Guard tanks in all these swamps, which are a really terrible defensive position. And of course, so it looks something like this. And of course, right after that, the final action for the turn I pulled out of the cup was the 5th Guard tanks activation shit, which allowed them to come up the road, that allowed the independent unit that was up here to move back down over here. They launched an attack on the 15th SS. Despite the column shift for the terrain, they managed to completely wipe it out and eliminate it. and they have freed up their supply line. So because they can trace back down this road all the way down the map. So what appeared to be a really good position for the Russians turned into a very bad one because the Germans reinforced, then turned into a very good position for the Germans that then turned in now to a very bad one for them because they have left some of these victory points undefended, thinking they could get the jump on the Russians. So just back and forth, a bunch of unpredictability, and how many different pocket universes are there out there where that didn't happen in that particular order? That's one of the main draws of chit pull games, I think, and you see it here as a perfect example. Well, Königsberg 45 kind of ended with a dull thud rather than an exciting finish. We just finished up the final turn of the game, and we got 2 points for the Russians. Nowhere near the 7 they needed. They were close in a couple other spots, but around turn 6 or 7, it was looking very unlikely the Soviets were going to be able to accomplish what they needed to accomplish. I'll show you some of the hot spots that were promising. Here at Lotsen, the Soviet Second Guard came in to try and make an attack, but right before they were able to push forward and assault the town, the Hermann Goering Panzers came down, made a counterattack, pushed off this Soviet tank unit, and basically spoiled that attack. That would have been a point for the Soviets had they been able to do it. They did still have some air power left over to be able to do it. They just couldn't get enough actions. They did manage to take Interberg here. That was the second point they got. An artillery barrage forced off the defending unit, and they were able to move in. They actually didn't really get close to Wehlau up here, and obviously Königsberg and environment, Bartenstein, nowhere close. There's another point here they didn't really get close to. Up over in the north, they did make an attempt on Thorn, but unfortunately were repulsed. They just didn't have enough attack strength mass. They were trying to do it again. They had another armored unit moving in, but they weren't able to get this formations activation shit. And the Germans pretty heavily reinforced the rest of the points up here. And this Großdeutschland division and regiment just were positioned in such a way that we couldn't get the rest of the unit up there without worrying about supply. So that kind of petered out. And then down here in this fortified position around, what town is this? This is Milau, which was just super hard to crack. Once the Germans got sort of entrenched in here, it was next to impossible to get them out. And it wasn't until this turn that this unit was able to knock them out of supply. So they were defending in here at full strength despite all of the Russians surrounding them. We tried 3 separate times to take this with air power, and German counter-air and this river line just served to spoil the attack. So Germans held out there as well. I think I think the Soviets got rolling pretty good at the start of the game. They managed to push up and make some huge breakthroughs, but it got real bogged down there at the end. And part of that is because of part of that might have been misplay on my part, but also part of it was in the final 3 turns, the second Belarusian front was just getting garbage chits pulled out of the cup in just either the wrong order or just units that were just useless to them. This 50th here, this is all these units down here who really have nowhere to go and nothing to do. The 65th who had, where are they? The 65th were somewhere in here. I mean, the final turn of the game was this formation who was stuck back down here, kind of just moving up the road. They weren't really in a position to attack or do anything. The 3rd, similarly, they were the units that managed to put this out of supply finally on the final turn, but it didn't end up mattering. And the 48th, here, that activation was these guys here who were ineffective against this fortified line. So the Soviets just ran out of steam and logistically were not efficient, didn't get lucky, however you want to describe it. It was not a good final couple of turns for the Soviets. They just stalled out big time. And it didn't help that on the second to last turn, they only got 3 activations here. And just the German unit strength on this side of the board was just too strong for the Soviets to overcome. They weren't able to drive deep as they were over in the west. So ultimately ends with a German victory, a German substantial victory, holding off the Soviet army here in 1945, even despite all these losses. I like the game. I don't want my disappointment in the way it ended to affect it. I think the game is really smart, and this system is great. This is a great introductory war game that still has enough meat on the bones that people who are used to playing hex and counter war games are really going to enjoy it. And I think the smartest thing that this game and this system does is that it turns what is a large scale game with lots of units and a big map into hundreds of tiny micro games with each action draw. You draw a chit and you can only activate those units. And so you get these little bite-sized chunks of decision making to make. And so there's not an overwhelming sense of, oh my God, I have this entire buffet in front of me. What do I pick? What do I choose? So you're kind of funneled into your decision making, which makes it very fun to play, very fast to play, very seamless, and just a really great, fun system. This game in particular, I think, suffers a little bit from chit bloat, which is what I'm going to call this. Here, hold on one second. Let me put all the chits in the cup and I'll show you what I mean. Here's what the cup looks like the final couple of turns of the game near the end. I mean, just look at how many possible permutations there are here. And what ends up happening is that despite, as the Soviets, you get all these reinforcements on the map, which is good, it also dilutes the cup, meaning the forces that you're using as your spearhead start to come up less frequently or have a chance to come up less frequently. And it really bogs down your offensive, which is exactly what happened here. I had the 5th Guard tanks really driving, and then they only got a few activations in the final end of the game. So it makes sustaining momentum very difficult, and you can argue whether or not that's historic or not, but it's certainly from a gameplay perspective kind of undoes some of the decisions that you make early without knowing what's going to happen in the future. So I would say if there is a downside, it is that. I would also say, how does, in comparison to Across the Narva, which is also this system, I think this game is a little broad and a little simpler, and I think those are both detriments to it. Having played Across the Narva first, I like that game better. If you were to ask me which one of these would I play, had I the choice, I would play Across the Narva. Across the Narva has more interesting decision points. It still does suffer a little bit from the chip bloat problem because by the end of the game, you have all these formations that you aren't able to really use, but there is enough force in the formations you have to sort of pinpoint specific, operations on the map that you can continue. A little better. It's a little more focused in this game. And the city of Narva thing in that game where you're defending the city and trying to put hits on the defensive works to try and break through is it's an interesting decision space because the way you use your air in that game is way more impactful. Do you save it for that assault on the fortress or do you use it to find somewhere else on the map to break through? In both games, I think the attacker, which are the Soviets, did end up suffering because of the way the chit draw system works. I think you'd have to be a little bit lucky to win as the attacker in these games. Which, could be a knock against it, or it could be good for someone who wants a challenge. But overall, I really like the system, and I really like this game too. I think this is a great one to, introduce someone to hex and counter war games with. It's very simple, and there's not a lot of overhead when you're playing it, and it is exciting and tense for the most part. I think, a lot of people like games to be tense and exciting right at the end because it makes it feel meaningful. And these games, both this and Across the Narva, tended to feel most exciting sort of in the early to mid game. And near the end, they were fairly predictable what was going to happen. So you may or may not like that feel. I personally don't necessarily mind too much. But just be aware that the climax of the game could come very early, and then the rest of it is just kind of a sort of foregone conclusion in some cases that you can kind of see the writing on the wall a little more than halfway through. But anyways, that is Königsberg, the Assault on East Prussia, 1945. There is one more game in this series that I would like to play, and that's Poland Defiant, which is the initial German rush through Poland in 1939. And that one, I believe, has a bit of a smaller scale, or at least it's not as counter-dense from what I can tell. And I would like to play that eventually. I forgot how much I really do enjoy playing this system. This makes for a great solo experience because of the chit draw, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you're just forced to react to the chits that come out. So, you can't really go wrong. For the price point, and the production value is really good, and the rules are really simple. If you're sort of a mid-weight wargamer, or you're looking to get someone into a lightweight wargame that has sort of the feel of a heavier wargame, this system from Revolution Games is definitely one that I think is a great choice for that, and very enjoyable despite some of the problems I have with the flow of the gameplay. So not sure what's next on the channel, thinking maybe back to great campaigns of the American Civil War now that I've got a little palate cleanser here with some World War II, and I'll be back soon.